we've got quite a lot to go through, so let's just get started. If you're watching this live, thank you for joining us. If you're watching the video, thanks for coming to our YouTube channel. But we're going to go through this quick presentation on how to emigrate to Australia through the business and investor migration program specifically. I'm going to step you through everything I can as small steps as I can, and of course highlighting some of the biggest changes that are happening in the middle of 2021. So let's get this going. You should be seeing the slides here. My name is William, and I'm part of the team here at Austral Migration Consultancy. I'm a registered migration agent along with a couple of my colleagues who you're seeing on the panelists. If you're watching this live, you can ask them any questions you have on the chat function or on the Q&A tab. So this is what we're going to cover today. I'm going to take about 35, probably closer to 45 minutes, a little bit of an introduction about myself and the company, a little bit about why people move to Australia. The main bulk of it will be the requirements for the investor and business program, and obviously the changes that are coming up in July 2021. We're going to step you through the visa process, a few case studies. Obviously, the biggest question on people's minds is how COVID-19 affects the applications currently and in the processing queue, and a little bit behind the scenes of what a migration agency or a law firm like ours does. All right, and we'll end with some Q&A if you're watching this live. So a little bit about Austral. Austral is basically, we're an Australian law firm. We have two Australian immigration lawyers as part of our management team, and we also have 4 migration agents registered in the company. We have offices in Australia, in Malaysia, and here in Singapore, where I am based out of. We specialize in Australian law. We don't do any other. We specialize specifically in Australian migration law, so we don't do any other countries at this point in time. And we also don't do any other forms of corporate or Australian law besides immigration law. And because of that, we've had quite a lot of success in it over the last couple of years. 2,000 visas approved and counting, and even visas being approved in the last couple of months as well, even with COVID happening. All right, you can check us up. All our licenses are on screen, and they're also on our website. So just touching very briefly about why people move to Australia. I've covered this in many of my previous webinars. The 4 main factors for people in the business and investor stream is primarily family-oriented reasons, right? So the first image represents education. They're trying to get their kids into Australia's education system, especially here in Southeast Asia. Although we have access to a lot of private education, we still have a favoring to sending kids to Australia to get that international exposure. And Australia is a very popular destination for that. So education is one of them. Living lifestyle in Australia. The second picture represents the cities in Australia. Third is agriculture. So a lot of people are familiar with coffee culture, the food and beverage scene in Australia. And although we do get that to an extent outside of Australia, like here in Singapore and Malaysia, it is a lot more expensive and it's not as fresh. So in Australia, you do get access to a lot of that fresh produce. And I guess the last one is, it's a very balanced culture. Even if you work or if you're running your own business, it's a relatively balanced work-life environment for people who are based there. So primarily for our business and investor clients, these are the 4 reasons that they typically have made known to us about why they moved there in the first place. So we'll go through a few of the statistics. I've used the 2018 to 2019 migration program because 2019 to 2020 is Australia's financial year goes from July the 1st until June the 30th of each given year. So the 2019-2020 program extends all the way to June the 30th of 2020. And by then you've had lockdowns and because of COVID. So this is the last representation of the most, I guess, accurate numbers or the most typical numbers you can find. So if you look at these by country, you've got India and China and the UK have traditionally made up the bulk of the migration program over the last 5 to 10 years. And then a lot of countries from Southeast Asia. Malaysia is usually swaps places with the US. It's thereabouts, approximately 10th on most years. Nepal and Vietnam have, in the Philippines especially, have long-standing connections to Australia, right? So these are the countries, and you can see it is very Southeast Asian dominant, right? In terms of numbers specifically, the Business and Investor Migration Program comes under the Skilled Migration Program. So I've highlighted it. This is also for the 2018-2019 migration year. If you can see, within Australia, most of the applications are done outside of Australia. There aren't that many applications done within Australia, except for things like work visas and a few types of family visas, like partner visas. But most other applications are done outside. So if you see the one I've highlighted outside of Australia, 6,465 business innovation investment visas were approved in the 2018-2019 migration year. And it's thereabouts in most years. So, you've got thousands of people applying for it from around the world on any given year. We'll start with the Investor Migration Program. We'll just jump straight into it. Today we're going to cover the Investor Migration Program first, and then the Business Migration Program, and then the process. Because both of the programs follow a similar process. It's just that the financial or the requirements for each of the programs, it differs. Right. Starting off the Investor Migration Program, you can see I've highlighted in the corner, there are minor changes coming in 2021. And I'll highlight them on the next slide. The two main visa types for the Investor Migration Program are the Investor Stream and the Significant Investor Stream, right? So some people refer to it as the Subclass 188B for the Investor Stream and the Subclass 188C for the Significant Investor Stream, right? One of the things you need to know is both of these visa streams are provisional. So you are given a visa that lasts a certain amount of time. You have to fulfill certain conditions within that time within Australia. And once you do, you're allowed to convert it to permanent residency. So you always start as a provisional resident for most of the visas we're talking about today. And then it converts to permanent residency after you fulfill certain conditions. So like I said, there's minor changes happening in 2021. And I'll go through them on the slide after this. But for the two investor visas, there are some specific requirements, and primarily the requirements for you to even be allowed to apply is based on your net value or the net assets in your name or your spouse's name or both your names combined, right? So I've highlighted there on screen, in your name or your spouse's name or combined in the last two past financial years. For the 188B or the regular investor stream, you're looking at having to prove 2.25 million Aussie dollars in net assets. It doesn't matter where these assets are. They can be whatever currency they are in. It doesn't matter. If you have property around the world, you can get them all valued. But it has to add up to 2.25 million Aussie dollars once the conversion rate from those currencies is done to the Australian dollar. The second one is the 188C or the Significant Investor Visa that requires $5 million in net assets. But instead of 2 years, they look at it as a snapshot. So you have $5 million in net assets at this point in time, you're allowed to apply. For the 188B, there is an age limit of 55 years old. There are some age waivers, which I'll go through later. For the 188C, there's no age limit. And again, I'll go through these again on the next slide. Now, for the 188B specifically, or the regular investor stream, there is also what's called a business points test. You must have at least 65 points or more to be allowed to apply. Points are accumulated based on age, net assets, business turnover, do you have a degree, and so on and so forth. There's multiple ways to add up your point score, but the Australian government is looking for you to have at least 65 points or more, right? So as the base requirements, we'll step through each one. Now, I've highlighted the changes for the investor program in green, and I'll go through those each one at a time, right? So let's go through the first one. So the investor stream or the 188B visa requires that you prove that you have 2.25 million Aussie dollars in net assets in your name, or your spouse's name, or both your names combined for 2 fiscal years or 2 financial years prior to you applying. So it's the start of 2021 now. So that means for the 2 prior years, it'll be the full financial year for 2020 and the full financial year for 2019. And out of the 2.25 million, they're looking at 1.5 million is in investments. So how do you define that? So for example, here in Singapore, houses are very expensive. So if you live in a $5 million house, and that's all of your net assets, the fact that it is above this 2.25 million, but you live in it, it doesn't allow you to apply because you need to prove that out of the 2.25 million, $1.5 million is in some form of investments. So how do you define investments? It could be stocks, bonds, investment property, and so on and so forth, even if the assets are in your business, right? You can't just be living in a, let's say, $3 million house, which is fully paid up, and that alone is not enough. You need to have $1.5 million in investments within the 2.25 million that they're looking for, right? So that's the first requirement. They look at your net value. Second requirement is that once you apply, once this visa is about to be granted, they will ask you to put $1.5 million into a state government bond for 4 years. So what does that mean? Now, you'll see later on when I do the process explanation that when you apply for an investor visa or any of these visas, business or investor visas, you have to apply through one of Australia's various states. So you have to apply through a state, and all of the states have their own government treasury bonds. So in this visa, first you choose a state. So let's say Western Australia. Well, that's where Perth is. If you choose Western Australia, then the requirement just before they grant you the visa is to invest $1.5 million into Western Australia's state bond, right? Now you can see in brackets, I've put there TBC, to be confirmed, 3 years. Now the full changes haven't been rolled out yet, and then haven't been explained in legislation as of yet. So right now, all we're working on is an announcement from the Australian government, but they haven't put it into law yet. And one of the changes it said is that for any of the visas, any of the provisional visas after July 2021, is that if you qualify within 3 years, you can convert it to permanent residency. Now, right now, the requirement for the bond is that it matures at 4 years, 4 years and 3 months to be specific. So I'm not sure if it's going to reduce to 3 years. We'll definitely let you know later on, but that's why I put to be confirmed. But currently, once you invest in a bond, it stays for 4 years and 3 months, after which you're allowed to apply for residency. The second requirement, besides keeping the bond to maturity, is that you must stay in Australia for 2 out of 4 years. Now, the person who stays in Australia can be either you or your spouse. You can't add it up, so it's either you or your spouse can clock in the 2 out of 4 years. It doesn't have to be 2 years in a row. It can be 2 years added up in any way that you want within that period, right? So 2 out of 4 years for you to qualify for the residency, for conversion to permanent residency. It says there 1st July 2021 changes that it's 2 out of 5 years. So again, I should have put to be confirmed on this one, but they're saying that any provisional visa in the investor or business stream will be given 5 years to fulfill their criteria after July the 1st. Now, does that mean you have 5 years to stay the 2 years? I believe that's the case. Based on what I've read, and based on what I read from the press release from the government, it does read like that you have 2 out of 5 years once July 2021 hits, right? So the last few miscellaneous things are that this is a state nominated visa. So although you apply to various states, it's up to them whether they want to nominate you. So you have to be nominated by a state. You can't just say, oh, I choose this state, and then it just goes through. You have to apply to the state, fulfill the state's conditions. Typically, the applicant has to be under 55 years old. There are some age waivers possible, which I'll explain later on. And then you have 65 points or more. So this is the regular investor stream, the regular investor visa that most people know. The good thing about these changes coming in place is that they didn't increase the amount. It's still the same as what it's been since 2012. It looks like they're going to increase some of the time you're given to fulfill your visa conditions, but the amount itself is going to stay the same. All right. The second visa we're talking about is the significant investor stream, or significant investor visa, subclass 188C. It is also a provisional visa. Minor changes are coming in. So the very first thing that is that the investment or the net assets or net value you have to show of yourself or your spouse or both of you combined is 5 million Aussie dollars that have been legally acquired. It's net assets. And this one is slightly different. They just say, show me $5 million in net assets. That's it, right? Then the requirement is that you have to invest $5 million into complying investments, which I'll show you on the next slide. It's a breakdown of specific categories which you have to invest in. And a lot of people are going to ask, or a lot of people ask, can I choose where it goes? Can I invest in, let's say, a commercial property here, and then I want to invest in some residential property there, and then I want to invest in this and this? So the answer is yes, but you can't do it yourself. You have to use authorized fund managers who will be allowed to allocate your funds in the way that the Australian government needs. There's a specific breakdown, which I'll show you, right? Now, again, I put there to be confirmed because the complying investments typically have to be held for 4 years as well, similar to the investor stream. But have the changes allowed it to be held for 3 years? Not too sure at this time, but that could be the case after July of this year. What I do know is that they have said that they'll give all the provisional visa holders 5 years to fulfill their conditions. And in the case of the 188C or the significant investor visa, the conditions are the stay conditions are different. So if you are the main applicant, you can stay 160 days in 4 years. It doesn't matter how you add it up. So that's about 40 days a year. You want to do it all in your first year, you can, or you want to do it split up across 4 years, it's up to you. But based on what I'm reading, it says now that you have 5 years to do so. So you've got 5 years to do that 160 days. And then they're going to give 2 sets of 2-year extensions each with additional stay requirements added on. So for example, if you can't hit 160 days in 4 years, then they'll allow you to do 240 days in 6 years or 240 days in 7 years after July. Again, if you can't hit that, you ask for an extension, it adds on another 2 years extension, then it becomes 320 days in 8 years or 320 days in 9 years come July of 2021. All right, so this stay condition is for the main applicant. So if you're applying as the main applicant, this is for you. If you want your spouse to fulfill the stay conditions just defaults to 2 years out of 4, right? So the good thing about this visa is that there's no age limit and there's no point score. If you have the assets, you're willing to invest into the funds as shown on the next slide, then you do qualify for this visa. Maximum visa extensions are shown. Again, it is a state nominated visa. That means that a state still has to nominate you, but trust me, if you're applying for this visa, pretty much any state is going to nominate you, right? So it is a faster visa because of the quantum of investment that goes into the state. So typically you're looking at the state can come back to you within 2 to 3 weeks, maybe up to a month in total. And processing times for this is approximately 12 months. So it is one of the faster visas out there. So this is the breakdown of how the complying investments work for the significant investor visa. So you can see 60% of the funds out of the 5 million or $3 million goes into what's called balancing investment. 10% goes into venture capital investment, and that is exactly what it sounds like. So when you use this fund manager, they have to allocate 10% of your investment amount and it has to invest directly into venture capital firms within Australia. 30% goes into small caps and emerging companies. And so the balancing investment is other things, like it could be commercial property funds, it could be bonds, it could be all sorts of other investments. But the investment, the 5 million, goes to the fund manager. Then the fund manager invests it typically into other funds or into a couple of companies directly. It really depends on each of the fund managers' profiles, but it has to follow exactly this. Right? So these are the complying investments. This has to be held currently for 4 years and with potential extensions. And then after July of this year, it's going to be 5 years with also potential extensions. Right? So that's how the breakdown works. For the business migration program, there are quite a lot of significant changes. And this is where the bulk of the changes were announced late last year. I'll go through each of them in detail after this, right? So I've labeled it major upcoming changes. The 2 main types of visas that we've typically applied for, or the most popular business visas, there are a couple others like venture capital stream visas for both of these visa subclasses, but they're not as popular. These 2 are by far the most popular business visas available. So the first one we refer to as Subclass 188A, or the Business Talent Permanent Significant Business History Stream. And the second one is the Subclass 188A, or the Business Innovation Stream Provisional. So the permanent and provisional that you see on screen is, that's a big deal. The first one, the 132A, is a permanent residency. It is the one and only business visa that gives you permanent residency from the time they grant you the visa. It is the one and only one. All other business visas, all other investor visas, they start as provisional. So you can see the second one, the business innovation stream, or the 188A, that's labeled provisional. All right. Now, what are the major changes? The first and probably the biggest one is that the subclass 132A is going away. On the 1st of July of 2021, they are closing all new applications to the entire subclass 132. The subclass 132 has two streams, the permanent, the significant business history stream and the venture capital stream. They're going to close both, right? So applications that are processed and accepted between now and June the 30th will still proceed. But once the subclass 132A is stopped on July 1st, no new applications will be taken. The second major requirement is that the business innovation stream, or the subclass 188A, the requirements to qualify for it are going to go up as well. And they're going to go up by quite a bit. So let's go through a couple of the base requirements before we go into details about each of the visas. So the requirements for both of these visas, and I get this question asked a lot, is can I buy a business in Australia and then use that to bring me over, or use that for the business visa? And the answer is, well, you can, but you can't use it immediately because it's for current business owners with a minimum of 2 years working, 2 years experience, or 2 years ownership of those companies, right? So it's current business owners, minimum of 2 years ownership of the company, typically under the age of 55, although there are certain age waivers that exist. There are different financial criteria the companies have to make, net value or sales turnover requirements. So net value could be your value or the business value, or both combined. And then there's some turnover or revenue requirements. And it varies depending on the visa type you're applying for. And for the subclass 188A only, there is a points test as well. All right. So these are the base requirements. It is for current business owners only, who've had at least 2 years of working experience, and typically under the age of 55. If you're above the age of 55, there are some age waivers possible. So this is the biggest change for the subclass 132A, or the business talent permanent significant business history stream subclass. It's quite a long title, but the 132A, it closes to new applications on the 1st of July 2021. Why is it closing? I guess based on what I'm hearing, based on discussions internally with our law, my colleagues Jason and John, it probably means that the people who applied for this in the past, it didn't fulfill the economic requirements that the government thought they would fulfill. And that's potentially why they're going, or they want the business owners to have a little bit more commitment to the various states. No, not sure exactly what the reason is. Only certain people in the Australian government will really know. But let's go through the requirements, because these requirements are going to stay between now and June the 30th. You have to give yourself enough time. If you're considering this visa, you have to give yourself enough time to get through a couple of the stages which we're going to talk about in a couple of slides time, before the June the 30th deadline. So if you start on June the 25th, you are unlikely to get across the line before July the 1st. So you got to give yourself a couple of months. So maybe 2-3 months at a minimum. Honestly, right now is the best time to start, because people are going to start rushing these applications in as the financial year comes to a close on June the 30th, right? So main requirements, first one, net value or net assets of $1.5 million. Now, so they're looking at your personal and business assets combined to be worth $1.5 million. But within that $1.5 million, $400,000 must be net business assets. So for example, if you own 100% of your company, and on the balance sheet, the net assets of the company is $500,000, then you already fulfill that criteria, right? So if you own a $2 company, then even if your net assets are $1.5 million, you can't apply for this visa stream, right? You'd have to apply for the 188A stream, which doesn't have these specific requirements. So $1.5 million in net personal and business assets, out of which $400,000 must be in your business. and you have to show it for at least 2 financial years out of the last 4. So at least 2 financial years out of the last 4. The second one is for your business revenue or business turnover. It has to be a minimum of $3 million per year for 2 financial years out of the last 4, right? So you can use up to 2 businesses combined to fulfill that criteria, but the requirement is you need to own at least 30% of each of those businesses if they're private, or at least 10% of the business if it is a public listed company. All right, so those are the first 2 main requirements. Now, the time to convert to get a PR, this is unique. Once they give it to you, you get residency straight away. So they give you permanent residency immediately. But 2 years after they give you permanent residency, they check to make sure that whatever conditions you agreed to from the state, you fulfilled. So again, this visa is a state-nominated visa. So you apply to various states around Australia, and every state has different requirements. So some states like South Australia will say if you invest into non-export of wine, but into our agriculture system or agriculture community, you only have to invest $600,000. If you invest in Western Australia, they say if you invest into a regular business, it's $1 million. So every state has different requirements, but they check after 2 years. They say, did you hit those requirements? Did you invest like you said you would? Did you buy property like you said you would? So every state has different requirements. Please reach out to us if you have a state in mind, and we'll definitely let you know specifically what the requirements are as it stands. Some of the states have varied their requirements as recently as this last month, like Victoria. Victoria said you have to invest different varying amounts depending on the industry, but you do need to hire X amount of people, whereas other states say you only need to hire 1. Some other states say you don't have to hire any. So it really depends, right? So what are they looking for? They're looking to see that you have a genuine, successful business career over the last couple of years, and a realistic commitment to be involved as the business owner in Australia. Now, typically for our clients who've made more than $3 million in revenue in their business, you're pretty much there. That's enough to show that you have a successful business career. And the question is which of the states you'd like to apply to, which have the different varying criteria, right? So again, this is the major change. This visa is going away. You have to give yourselves a couple of months to get the first few stages out of the way, after which it will lock in, meaning that even after July the 1st, your visa will still be processed, right? So this is the first major change. The second major change comes for the Subclass 188A. So Subclass 188A is typically the most popular business visa out there. And why is that? It's because it has the lowest entry-level criteria. If you look at the one in black, before I go through the red, you can see that the criteria is much lower than the 132A. The first one, net value or net assets, is $800,000. So it doesn't say any specifics of how it has to be added up. It's just $800,000. So if you have net value of $800,000 of you or your spouse or both of you combined, for 2 financial years out of the last 4, you do qualify. After July the 1st of 2021, it's going to go up to $1.25 million. So that's an increase of over 50%. All right. So again, it does take a little bit of time to get these across the line. So you need to lock in what's called an invitation to apply, which I'll show you later on, before the 30th of June. Before the 30th of June, you need to receive an invitation to lock in the processing or the continued processing of this visa with the previous requirements, so the existing requirements. Now, if you're watching this live, if you're asking any questions, my colleagues in the panel will answer them, and I'll look at them again later on. If you're watching this on a video, just leave your comments below. We'll try to get to them later on. The second one, business turnover. So you can see the business turnover requirement is a lot less. It's only $500,000 compared to $3 million for the 132A. It's also for 2 out of the last 4 years, right? So that's just business turnover, which means sales. It's not gross profit. It's not profit. It is purely sales. So purely sales of at least $500,000 for at least 2 out of the last 4 years. Now, after the 1st of July, it goes up to $750,000. So again, 50% increase is coming soon. And I know a lot of you are watching from Malaysia and other parts of Southeast Asia, and even here in Singapore. So this change might basically make it so that your business doesn't qualify anymore. So if that's the case, and it's something that you're looking at doing in the next 2 to 5 years, you'd have to start now. It's pretty much the only time left for you to do that. Otherwise, you'd have to wait a further 2 years and also increase all of these financial criteria of by 50% across the board, right? The business must be, and then once you fulfill these criteria, then they can decide whether to nominate you. Again, it's a state-nominated visa. And then when your visa is granted, there are specific financial criteria you must meet as part of the requirements for this visa. For example, within the 4-year period, and by the way, I didn't add it here, but the requirements right now must be fulfilled within 4 years. So if it says there, the business must be 2 years old, you must stay for 12 months in 2 years. Right now, you have 4 years to do all of that. After July the 1st, you will have 5 years to do all that. And then there are certain ways to get some of these visas extended as well after July the 1st. But typically, they're looking at you fulfilling the conditions within 5 years. After 1st of July, right now, it'll be 4 years, right? So you have to hit certain financial criteria. I think once your business is set up in Australia, in a 12-month period, you have to hit $400,000 in revenue. You have to hit certain net value of your business, and so on and so forth. So it really depends on which state you've applied to. Each state has slightly different variations. Please do reach out to us to kind of gauge which state you're looking at, what type of business you are thinking of starting there, because not every state allows all types of businesses for this visa. So some states have specifically said, oh, you can't start a sundry store, you can't start a little supermarket. Some states said you can't start F&B, whereas other states said you can start anything you want, all right? So do reach out to us, let us know, and we'll try and get back to you as soon as we can. So you need to have 65 points or more on a business points test. If you're not sure how to do that, again, reach out to us. Any of these visas which require a points test, you have to reach out to us because it is it's quite a long table of different ways to get points. For example, if you have a trademark, you get more points. If you have designs, registered designs or patents, you get more points. There's quite a few ways to accumulate the points, right? So that's pretty much it. You need to have certain criteria to qualify for the visa. Once they give you the visa, then you have to hit certain criteria, financial criteria, to convert the visa from provisional to permanent. Stepping back a bit, for the 132A, I said they'll check after 2 years. So what happens at the 2-year mark? If at the 2-year mark, they said, yep, you pretty much did everything we asked you to do, then your residency stays, your permanent residency remains. If you didn't do anything at all during that 2-year period, then they have the right to cancel your visa. So do keep that in mind for the 132A. So the type of businesses that they allow across the board varies depending from state to state, all right? I'll go through a couple of them, but certain states are looking at certain types of businesses compared to others. So like Victoria, New South Wales, and some of the categories, they'd like high technology businesses or maybe innovative or new businesses that's gonna bring up the name of the state, all right? We'll go through a couple of these. So some people bring an original business from outside of Australia to Australia. So on the left, you'll have a good example is like F&B. Some people have brought in a popular F&B chain from outside of Australia to within Australia, and it really depends on which state. Not all states allow F&B as the business. Most states would, but maybe in some of the states, like Queensland specifically for the 188A don't, but some other states do. So some people bring in, if you own a restaurant, a successful restaurant, you want to bring it over, that's one option. The picture on the right is one of our clients, Ian. He runs a successful bespoke men's clothing wear line within Southeast Asia. So he set up exactly the same thing in Queensland a couple of years ago, and it is a replica of exactly what he's already doing. So this is just an example with other clients who are moving exactly the same things across as well. They may own manufacturing or some sort of innovative technology or whatever they were doing in the past, they're looking at doing in Australia as well, because they see that there is a business opportunity for them to do so there, right? So that's the first category, same as your original business. In most cases, this is fine. In some cases, depending on the state, it is not. So please do reach out to us to find out if it is in your case. The second is property development. Now, obviously, this is going to be the most popular. Property development, it typically just takes capital investment, right? Invest into builders, invest into designers, or whatever it may be. And yes, throughout most of Australia, property development is allowed, but there are conditions. Depending on the state that you apply to, the amount you have to invest to be in property development could be higher. So some states will say you need to invest X amount. Some states say you need to show me that you have a background in property development. Most of the states don't say that, but most of the states will have a minimum amount you have to invest if you want to go into property development, right? And there are companies out there that will set it up for you, which we have access to, or some people we can recommend you to. So what that means is that if you invest the amount, they will go and handle everything else. They will set up the infrastructure for the property development company. All right, you've invested into the company. They'll engage the builders, project managers, architects. They'll get the land for you. Then when it's built, they'll try and sell it for you, and so on and so forth. There are companies out there which will do that. So if that's something you're interested in, please leave us a message in the comments below, or just reach out to one of my colleagues in the panelists right now, and we can talk a little bit more about that, right? So property development, also very popular, but usually higher investment quantum. Agriculture and farming. This is also more popular than people expect, especially in places like South Australia, to an extent, Victoria and Queensland. And this goes, there's a few ways to do this. Either agriculture as an investment into existing or startup type farms. So if you are going to invest into a tomato farm, for example, or an orange farm, which is and there are companies as well who have been set up to do this. They already have the infrastructure in place. They just need more capital expenditure. They'll set up a company for X amount of plots of land, and that's yours, but they'll make sure that it's staffed and so on and so forth. So there's that type of investment into actual farms. If you want to do this yourself as well, that is fine. Most states will be very happy for you to do this, because this takes labor, so there will be manpower involved in it. It takes land acquisition, and obviously it takes you'll be exporting of these state goods out of the state, which obviously they like. That's the first type of investment, farming. The second type would be export. So it'd be exporting of existing agriculture from the state outside of Australia. So for example, in South Australia, if you approach growers and you export grapes or oranges or any of the stone fruits, same for Queensland and other states, that's fine as well. So essentially, it's kind of like trading. You are approaching growers who can supply you the fruits. Then you need to approach logistics to get the fruits safely to the countries that you're exporting it to. And obviously, if you have your own supply channels, that's great. Again, there are companies which we know of which can help you with all of that. You invest the money, whatever the amount the state has required, you invest it with them. They will take processing fees and so on and so forth, and they will sort that out for you. So a lot of people, they do it just to maintain their visa. So if the investment says $600,000 into South Australian agriculture, then that's what they'll do. They'll invest that amount. Whether or not they get it all back, they're not too fussed, as long as they get to convert that visa to residency. So there's plenty of options out there. Some people are doing it to make a profit. Some people are doing it just to get residency in Australia. Again, depending on how you want to do it, or depending on how your profile is, again, you just have to reach out to us or leave a comment below. Last field which I've added is technology and innovation. So this one is, I'd say, quite in high regard across Australia. If you're bringing in anything technology related, startup related, then you may qualify for some of the venture capital streams or some of the innovation streams. But typically, if you're already in a technology or innovation firm, or you're in the technology or innovation line, and you want to set up the same thing in Australia, in most cases, they'd be very happy for you to do so, right? You just have to show your profile and exactly what you already have and what you're willing to bring Australia, has for decades been an innovation, a country which thrives on innovation, especially in technology and energy, renewable energies and those kind of fields. If you're bringing something like that in, you'll have a good chance in most of the states. So again, if you are in technology or innovation or energy or renewable energy type company, please reach out to us. There are quite a few options. In fact, if you are a technology or innovation company, besides the business visas, there is another visa stream called the Global Talent Visa, which may get you across the line as well, because that one is specifically for innovative individuals. It will have nothing to do specifically with the business requirements or the business criteria that I talked about earlier, but they'll look at you more as an individual. Are you an innovative individual? And if so, that visa is specifically for permanent residency. So if you think that's you, again, do reach out to us. The Global Talent Visa is an alternative option. Right, so let's show you the migration process. Again, I mentioned that the process is the same regardless of which visa you apply for. Whether it's a business visa, whether it's the investor visa, it all looks like this. Every stage must be done one before the next. You can't skip any stages. The very first one, business or asset assessment, is usually with a law firm like ours. You engage a legal professional to go through and make sure that on paper, your assets and your revenue or whatever they required is in place. Now, we do that for free at our firm. So if you reach out to us, we will do a complimentary business or personal asset assessment valuation and also a point score to see if you qualify. You'll be given a link to register your interest if that's what you want to do later on in this presentation or in the description below. So that's the first step. You need to see, do you actually qualify for any of these visas? Do you have the 2.25 million? Do you have the 5 million? Do you have the 1.5 million? Are you making the $500,000 in revenue? All that's done in stage one. You shouldn't apply if you don't qualify because your visa will easily be rejected, right? The second and third stages is called the pool of applicants. Now, all of these visas require a state nomination. But before you can get a state nomination, you go into a pool called the expression of interest pool. The expression of interest pool is where you enter Australia's government system and you tell them what type of visa you're applying for and which state you're applying to. And then from that, either you have to make a direct application, which is stage 3, to various states, or the state will select you from the pool and then ask you to finalize your application manually. All right. So some states will say, okay, apply to me directly. And if they say apply to me directly, means you submit an expression of interest, then you apply to the state directly using either a state level system or emails or whatever. Other states will say submit an expression of interest, then wait, then I will select you from the pool. When I select you from the pool, then you prove to me all of the documents, all the information that you're claiming for this application. So pool of applicants, that's where a lot of the action happens, right? That's where the movement for these visas happen. Because stage number 4, invitation to apply, that's when the federal government, so Australia has federal governments and state governments. At stage number 4, the invitation to apply, the federal government comes in and they say, look, here's your invitation. The state has nominated you. The state has invited you. So because the state has invited you, I can invite you as well. When you receive the invitation, it locks in everything. It locks in your age, it locks in the time of the application, everything. And when it comes to some of these changes that I've highlighted, if you receive the invitation to apply on June the 30th of 2021 or before that date, then no matter what happens after that date, your visa will still be processed. So for example, if you're 54 years old and like 360 days, you're very close to the age limit, right? But if you receive the invitation to apply on that day, your age is locked in, right? So that's an important stage. Now, how long does it take to get from the first stage or when we assess assets and business requirements up to an invitation to apply? It varies from state to state. Some states could come back in as fast as 30 days. Some states do. Western Australia, Queensland, we've seen them come back in 30 days. Some states come back slower than that. It varies depending on which state you're looking at, all right? But typically, I'd say most cases, Most of this stages 1 to 4 can happen within 3 to 4 months. It can happen within 3 to 4 months, but as we are approaching this June the 30th, 2021 deadline, that it's going to get tighter. As more and more people apply, there's more and more work to be done by the state departments. And the state departments, they're not very big. The business and investor migration departments for each of the state, they only have a small team in each of them. So the more work they get, the longer it'll take for them to process. So if you're looking at starting, you have to start in the next 1 or 2 months to really give you a chance to make sure you are not hit by the changes after July the 1st. Then, once your visa is processed, after the processing time, your visa is granted. So how long does this process take? And typically, it's varied from year to year. If we go back as recent as like 2017, you'd probably be looking at about 12 to 16 months. And then as we progressed and the visas became more and more and more popular, it has started to extend a bit more than that. But typically, most visas are, you're there or thereabouts within about 18 to 20 months. And we have seen a lot of movement in the last couple of months in terms of visas being processed. You're looking at around 18 to 20 months, sometimes faster. In the case of the 188C, that's a lot faster, but typically around that time. Are they going to speed it up? Not too sure. It looks like they are slowly speeding it up because obviously the more visas they grant for the business and investor stream, the more money goes into Australia, which we're going to talk about when we come to the COVID section. Now, once your visa is granted, you have approximately 12 months to make an initial entry to Australia. That means one entry. That doesn't mean you have to move there permanently. You just need to make a single entry. You can leave after that. But remember, each of the visas has a validity period. It has minimum stay criteria. So obviously, you can't get the visa and then not move to Australia at all. There is a minimum amount of time which you will have to be there, depending on which visa you applied for. The visa fees vary from visa to visa, but it's approximately what you see on screen. There's a fee for whoever's the main applicant, anywhere from $5,500 up to $8,000. Secondary applicant, which is typically the spouse, $2,000 up to $4,000. And then you've got, for kids, it's about $1,000 to $2,000. Now, what's the oldest age of a child to add to any of these visas? And the answer is, as long as they are under the age of 23, when they receive an invitation to apply, and they're dependent on you financially, such as a student, for example, somebody who's not already working, then yes, you can attach them to this visa. Each of the states has a fee. This one, we've put an approximate of $900. It varies, like Western Australia is $750. Other states are a little bit more pricey, but the states charge approximately $900 as a state application fee. And then there's miscellaneous, such as health and police clearances, about $250. English tests required? The answer is not necessarily. There is a minimum English level you have to have. You can prove that level by showing either you have a degree that you took in English, as in the medium of teaching was in English. You could show a diploma, you could show an English test, and so on and so forth. If you're from specific countries, you don't have to show anything. In a worst case scenario, if you don't want to take the English test, you don't have to. You just have to pay a surcharge in your visa. That's it. Right? Anything that is due, that you have to do to prove your assets and your turnover, like paying valuers, paying your corporate secretary and accountant, to get share certificates and all that, that's outside of this. You will have to engage those third parties yourself, right? So that's not included in this. Now, we'll talk quickly on age waivers. There are certain age waivers for certain states. So for the subclass 188B, which is the investor stream, if you're above the age of 55, you can get an age waiver if you agree to invest 50 to 100% more on top of the $1.5 million in the government bond. So some states will even say, look, if you are above this age, if you invest 100% more on top of the government bond, but in an asset within the state, then they can allow that as well. So if you invest $1.5 million into Western Australia's government bond, and then you agree to invest like $1.5 million in other various assets within the state, they can consider giving an age waiver as well. Same too for the subclass 188A and 132A business visas. Increased investment is required. Maybe they'll ask you to invest in regional parts of the state instead, or employment of a larger workforce. So it varies depending on the state and the visa you're applying for, but age waivers are definitely a possibility. You just have to keep in mind that it's either going to take higher investment, higher manpower, or investment into a regional part of the state. We'll talk a little bit about COVID-19 and how it has affected visas. Now, obviously, the first thing that people have to understand is that there's travel restrictions, right? Here in Singapore, Malaysia, wherever else you are watching this, Australia also has its own travel restrictions. So they have travel lockdowns, and there's isolation, as in there's quarantine upon arrival. There are typically no students, no tourists allowed, and temporary visa holders at this point. But having said that, when it comes to the business and investor stream, the visas are still being processed. On the state level, they're still issuing nominations. On the visa grant level, they're still issuing visa grants. One of the good things about any of the investor visas, so for the 132 visa, the 132A, because you're a permanent resident, there are no travel restrictions for permanent residents. So I'm a permanent resident of Australia. If I want to go back now, I can. I just have to do the quarantine, but you don't have to apply for any exemptions. But for pretty much every other visa, you do, except they have recently added business, innovation, and investment visas. So any investor visa holder, business visa holder in the 188 subclass, you can go back as well. All right. So travel restrictions, border controls, that's one of the first things you have to understand. The other thing you need to understand is what I said earlier about how long it takes for applications to get processed. It takes about 18 to 20 months. And right now, which you'll see in a few slides, is probably the best time to apply for any of these investor or business visas. Well, not just for the fact that a lot of them are going to change in the next 6 months, but they've also allocated a lot more places. They've allocated a lot more places, and it's going to take 18 to 20 months to process them. But those first couple of months are key, because the invitation, the places, the changes that I talked about, they happen only if you don't get selected within this current financial year. Well, I'll show you some samples a bit later on. A lot of people ask, what does a law firm like us do? What does a migration agency do? Well, because we specialize in Australian immigration law, that's pretty much our main focus, understanding specifically the law for these visas. There's the two visas we talked about, 132 and 188. A lot of them have a lot of policy documents behind it. How do we prove the assets? How do we prove that the person has turnover? Can people get across the line if they don't have all of the percentage ownership that we talked about? And the answer is yes, in certain cases there are. So if you don't have 30% ownership, but it's a family company, you can reach out to us and we'll have a look at that. So understanding the law, probably the most important thing we do. Managing your cases, we manage all our cases with specialized law software. So it's dedicated to Australian migration, and we do use this internally. We have a dedicated processing team that does this, and we have the most Australian lawyers and migration agents in-house within Malaysia and Singapore for sure, and probably most of Southeast Asia. We have the most licenses internally. We use web portals to collect all information. It's just a better way of version tracking. That means that if you send me an updated document, I know what version it is. It's not just going to be overwritten. It keeps track of each and every version of that document. Now, why do people use an agency? Why do people use a law firm? Now, primarily it's understanding exactly how the law works. But it's more than that, it's more than just filling in forms. We need to know if you qualify. We need to prove that you qualify. We need to tell you which pathway is best for you. We need to tell you maybe your spouse is a better person to apply for this. You need to provide exactly the correct documents. So we need to submit the exact documents and know which documents to collect from you. And many, many times when you apply for these visas, you only get one chance. Meaning that if you get through all the stages, they invite you, and then you accidentally forgot document A or document B or claim the wrong things, they will refuse your visa. They may not allow you to apply for it again, or if they do, they'll put grace periods of up to 3 years. So that's why people typically use this, is to take a lot of the bulk of all this processing and paperwork and time consumption off their hands and into the hands of legal professionals like ourselves. When you're looking at choosing an agency, please check all of the Mara licenses or registration licenses that they claim to have. These people should be internal to the company, registered within the offices of those countries. So you can go to Mara.gov.au, you check any of our licenses, you'll see that I'm registered here in Singapore. I'm also registered with our business entity in Australia and Malaysia, and vice versa with all of my colleagues who are registered as well. We're registered across our group of companies. If you see somebody, a company, you do some checks on them and they're registered, the agent is not registered in the country, then you have to ask why did they do that? Or if you check the license and the person is registered in a different business entity in Australia, but you're talking to an entity in Malaysia or Singapore, again, you have to wonder why exactly is that. You have to be careful of certain registration statuses, like registered under the TTMRA, which means that they're registered in New Zealand, and through the Trans-Tasman Agreement, they have cross-registered themselves in Australia. Does that mean they're trained in Australian law? No, not necessarily. Fees should be in your local currency. Every business entity that you deal with, whether it's a Malaysian one or Singaporean one, each of them has to charge you in their currency. So Singapore dollars, Malaysian ringgit. Try not to engage a local agent who's charging you in Australian dollars, because that doesn't make sense, because all of us, all business entities within your country should be paying tax to that country. And sometimes when they're charging you in Australian dollars to an Australian business entity, they are avoiding tax regulations, right? Now, why apply now? So I've got a couple of slides here to show you why people are looking, or why they should be even applying now. So Minister Alan Tudge, who's the Minister for Population, Cities and Urban Infrastructure, he is not the acting Minister for Immigration anymore, I believe. I think he has selected somebody full-time for that, but he is for the upcoming financial year, which ends June 30th, and probably longer, because of everything that's happened with COVID. They're looking at innovators, investors, and job creators to help Australia recover economically. And that's the target of their skilled visa program, which includes the business and investor program. So he submitted this press release after Australia's 2021 budget, which was in October of last year. He released this. In line with that, what they've done is they've increased the amount of places for the business and investment program for this financial year. So 2020, 2021 migration program planning levels, they increased the business and innovation investment program from about 7,500, which I showed you earlier. It was about 6,500, 7,000 grants in the 2018-2019 year. So this year it's going to be 13,500. And then below that, you can see the global talent visa. So if you are in that field as well, which you think you might have a technology, or your company is quite well known for certain innovation, that visa has 15,000 places. So do reach out to us if you think that you fulfill the conditions of that visa, or if you'd like to find out more about this visa, again, leave a comment below or use the link that we're going to send to you later on. So let's have a look at some of these invitations. So this is a little bit older one. This is from 2nd of April of last year. New South Wales, 65 points, subclass 188. We've got one here from 17th of April, subclass 132, Victoria, significant business history stream. So throughout even the major lockdowns, they were still inviting people. So this is throughout April. We've got the investor visa here. And in terms of the total number of visas that we are managing, and this number is the screenshot's a bit old, but right now we're managing that number you see on screen of the 132, 188, and 888 visas. We have 101 and more now in our system. What that means is that we have a portion of that being processed, a portion of that already visa granted. So we've got a lot of history in this visa stream, or any of these visa streams. So we're actively managing a portion of that, and a lot of the others are actually visa grants, which I'll show you right here. So these are actually visa grants, and they're from, what we realized was in the middle of last year, there weren't as much movement in terms of visa grants, but as we, after or just around the budget time, which was around October of last year, there started to be more movement. So this is the 14th of September 2020, subclass 188, business innovation investment. So this is specifically for, I can't remember which state this is, but for the subclass 188, 14th September, 2020, visa granted. We've got a couple of screenshots here. We're looking at 2nd October 2020, business innovation stream for subclass 188 on the left. We're looking at another subclass 188, 14th of October 2020 on the right. So these are visa grants. So all these visas were granted. These people can now move to Australia whenever they want to. 20th of October, another business innovation visa grant, subclass 188. On the left, we had some in November as well. This is the subclass 132, significant business history stream on the left. And also on the 2nd of November, another significant business history. So there were a couple of days where we got quite a few visa grants in a row, and then it starts to spread out after that. We've got some more from November, 2nd November on the left, subclass 132, significant business history, and also significant business history 132 on the right, 6th of November. And then I screenshot one from last week, 18th of January 2021, subclass 188. I think this was the investor stream. I forgot to take a screenshot. 18th of January 2021. So all of these are visa grants that shows the visas are still being granted, right? So yes, if you're looking at starting an application, just reach out to us. If you're watching this live, you just have to go to the link that we have sent out to you, or the link that you'll be taken to after this. If you are watching a video of this, please leave a comment below, or just use one of the links in the description. Ask for a one-on-one consultation to start your application. What do we do? We assess whether you qualify. We check your assets for free, and your business revenue, just to check that you qualify. And you know, not everybody does, but if you do, we'll definitely break down exactly why. And once your visa is granted, we can point you in the right direction of business brokers, property developers, tax business setup, financing, even those traders for fruit agriculture. We can point you in that direction, all right? So you don't have to start everything from scratch. You do have some resources that we can help you with once your visa is granted. Now, here's the link. If you are watching this as a replay, just go to australmigrate.com/seminar-promo, fill in your details there, and one of our team will get back to you, right? So we've come up to just about an hour. I tried to get through that as fast as I can. We're going to go through whatever questions you have now. If you're watching this live, go ahead and ask your questions. I'll go through as many as I can. If you're watching this as a video, just leave a comment below, and we will try and get back to you there as well. So we've got a couple of questions here. It says, the first question is for the 188C visa, how long does the $5 million need to be invested with the fund manager? Currently, it's at 4 years. Will they increase that, or will they decrease that to 3 years? Not sure at this point in time until that is put in legislation. Right now, it is 4 years. But after January 2021, even if it is 4 years, they'll give you 5 years to fulfill those visa requirements, right? So right now, basically, you invest immediately once they are indicating that your visa is going to be granted. So if you remember the process flow, near the invitation, near the visa grant stage, so there's invitation to apply, which is stage 4, and then visa grant stage 5. For any of the investor visas, the money is not upfront. They don't say, you've started your application today, invest today. No, the money investment comes just before they grant you the visa. They say, okay, we're about to grant you the visa. Now you need to invest into the bond or into the fund manager's accounts. So we have people asking about age waivers. And again, age waivers is about investment typically. So if you're looking at an age waiver, you might have to invest into a regional part of Australia. You might have to invest more into the bond. Do reach out to us. Use the link you see on the screen to kind of for us to gauge if you qualify. Can you withdraw your bond and investment money after it matures? And the answer is yes, but they do strongly encourage you to keep it within Australia. So yes, you can withdraw it. That's not their money. It's your money in the end. If you withdraw it before that time, which you are allowed to do as well, that's fine, but that's in breach of your visa conditions. So that might have implications on your visa. But in terms of the money is still yours. The interest still comes to you. Yes, so we have a question here about age limit for kids. Again, it's like what I mentioned earlier. It is 23 years old, but they have to be 23. They have to be below the age of 23 when you make by the time you're invited, and they have to be financially dependent on you. So typically, people still in school, right? So I don't think we have any other questions. My colleagues have answered pretty much all the questions. If you have any questions that you'd like me to go through, and you're watching this on YouTube or on Facebook, just leave a comment below. We'll definitely go through it as best we can. We have another question here. Once you get permanent residency, are your children eligible for local fees? And yes, all permanent resident children are eligible for local fees, but only permanent resident, not provisional resident, unless it's a university by university conditions. So some universities may offer provisional resident holders lower fees to get their kids in, but you'll have to discuss that with your university directly, right? So I think that's pretty much it. It's been about an hour. Thank you so much for your time. If you like this video, please share it out with other people. We will be adding more videos as we can. If you're watching this live, thank you for taking the time to join us. Stay safe, because we know there are lockdowns in different parts of the regions where we're in. And again, if you have any questions, if you need to book in a consultation, please use the link you see on screen, because we do not have many places. We are usually fully booked. Please do that. A consultant will get back to you, or myself, or one of my other colleagues, and we'll be able to answer any questions that you have. All right, so enjoy the rest of the weekend or week ahead, depending on when you're watching this, and I'll be in touch or with another video soon. All right, take care, and thank you so much for your time.